The chair would observe that we do have a quorum in the room of our members, so if the members would go ahead and move to the dais, we will begin. Clerk call the roll. Wait a minute, here we go. Okay, clerk close the roll. Okay, thank you, clerk. All right, we went through our formalities with our beginning meeting for the 2019 session yesterday, so we're going to jump right into business today. We have a presentation from the Secretary of Finance, but I've been asking, I think it would be good to go ahead. We have one major bill that was pulled onto the docket for today. Senator Ruff dealing with the Amazon legislation. We've got quite a number of people with interest in that, so I thought we'd go ahead and handle that first. So, Senator Ruff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your changing the schedule around a little bit. There are a few folks that are interested in this. This sets up the incentive grants for Amazon, which it's $22,000 per employee paid for any employee over $150,000 for up to 25,000 employees. This was what was in the MOU that was announced when the government made this announcement in November. The incentives are to at least in part reimburse the company for expenses in recruitment and training of employees. The bill sets up a means to set up a special non-recurring fund to hold funds needed to cover these reimbursements because they are not payable until 2013. This will allow for long-term planning as these jobs create new payroll taxes prior to the start of the payment to the company. Should the company continue to grow beyond the original 25,000 employees, the incentive will decrease to 15,564 for up to 12,850 additional jobs. Furthermore, there's a 1.5% inflation factor in the MOU after the year 2019. At this time, I think Secretary Ball is going to be here, want to make some comments, wherever he may be.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for letting us appear before you this morning. A lot of work has gone into this, and Senator Ruff has been one of the very hard workers. Stephen Murray and VEDP have been a part of this process. We've gotten a lot of wonderful guidance from MEI over a course of many, many months. And it's not my intention the bill's in front of you, it's not my intention to repeat what Senator Ruff has said, but I did want to make a couple of comments. Amazon has been, throughout this process, a wonderful partner. And we have strived at every step along the way through a collaborative effort to be good stewards of the Commonwealth's resources. I'd like to, at the risk of stealing Mrs. Sullivan's thunder, I would like to say a little bit about Amazon. They're no stranger to Virginia. They've been here a good long while. We have 8,500 full-time employees in Virginia. And they stand up about 28,000 small and mid-sized businesses with their operations, and they've invested over 29 billion in Virginia already. That's before we're talking about the proposed investment they'd be making. They have 6 fulfillment centers here, 3 prime now hubs, 6 solar facilities, several large data centers, and the East Coast campus of Amazon Web Services. And so we've been through a long process, starting with, I guess, around 240. Amazon was looking at 240, 250 sites, and so here we are. The incentive bill before you today is something that is very important to Amazon. It was a lengthy negotiation, but far more important to them are the investments they want to see us make in higher ed, which will be in another bill that is before the Senate. I do want to call out the fact that as Amazon creates jobs, the payments in the fund that's created by this legislation would be made, but only after the jobs are actually created. So we're not taking financial risk coming out of the blocks. There's actual job creation. And as far as their incremental investment, it's 2.5. I think it's estimated to be about $2.5 billion in the new facility that they have committed to do in Arlington County. I hope it would be the pleasure of the committee to advance the bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I do think Mrs. Sullivan wanted to say a few things if that,
Yes,
if that works for the chair. sir.
let's have some comments from
Okay.
Amazon directly before we move any further.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here today. Really appreciate it. This is an important day for us. And I'm Holly Sullivan. I'm head of our worldwide economic development for Amazon, and really excited about this expansion, this project slated for Arlington County. I'd like to talk to you about a few items today. I'll keep it brief, I promise, including our longstanding investment in Virginia, why we chose Virginia, and our partnership with the Commonwealth. First, as Secretary Ball mentioned, we're no stranger to Virginia. We have over 8,500 full-time employees here, and we know it's a great place to live and to work. This includes associates working at our fulfillment and sortation centers in Ashland, Chester, Clearbrook, Petersburg, Springfield, Sterling, Virginia Beach, and right here in Richmond. It includes our large Amazon Web Services team in region in Northern Virginia with over 1,500 employees there. And because of the talent pool of service members in Virginia, our workforce includes approximately 1,500 veterans and veteran spouses. We also have made investments in solar power infrastructure in Buckingham, New Kent, Sussex, Powhatan, Accomack, and Southampton counties. Second, the leading driver in our decision was really the talent pool that we can get today and in the future in building that talent pipeline. The Tech Talent Pipeline Initiative will only make Virginia more competitive for Amazon, but also all businesses across the Commonwealth. We are impressed by Virginia's rich history of creating an environment that will allow all businesses to thrive. The more than 30,000 Virginia-based Amazon sellers today already know this. We're excited to continue to stitch ourselves into the fabric of this great community. Finally, I want to address the positive economic impact stemming from the investments of this project. As we build our new headquarters, we're going to invest $2.5 billion. We're going to create over 25,000 new jobs with an average wage of over $150,000 annually. And we're going to occupy 4 to 8 million square feet of energy-efficient office space in Arlington County. In addition to our direct hiring and investment, the construction and ongoing operation will create tens of thousands of additional jobs and billions of dollars of additional investment. As a result of this investment, we are anticipating an incremental tax revenue of over $3.2 billion to the Commonwealth. Over the next decade, this project should generate over $340 million in additional tax revenue. It's also important to note, as Secretary Ball stated, that all these incentives are post-performance, meaning we have to make the investment, we have to create and maintain the jobs, and generate the tax revenue before we receive $1 of that tax incentive. The legislation before the committee today is an investment in the future growth of the Commonwealth. It will help diversify the economy, and it will serve as a catalyst for drawing other businesses to the entire state. We truly believe that this project, from the jobs to the workforce development initiatives and tech talent pipeline initiative, and the tax revenue generated will benefit all of Virginia. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today in support of this legislation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Are there questions for our representative here from Heidi, who has been at the table all along, including earlier projects? Yes, Senator Norman?
Yes, Senator.
Good morning, Holly. It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you again, too.
So how are you this morning?
I'm super. Thank you.
Are you feeling really good about this piece of legislation?
We're excited about it. We think it's very important. It's there's many steps. It's early in the process of this development, but this is step one.
Well, I'm in much more of a cream puff mood than the last time we chatted, so thank you
It
for
was
what you're doing.
yes. I
Okay.
appreciate that. That was a tough meeting.
All right. Obviously, some of us who had the opportunity to be at the table with the MEI Commission are much more familiar with this than others. Are there other members that have a question at this point in time? Hearing none. Senator Ruff, you have anybody else you want to speak?
Yeah, I believe Josh Levy with the Northern Virginia Technology Council wanted to speak,
Okay, great.
whether he wants to or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Levy with the Northern Virginia Technology
Josh.
Council. We're excited to be here today to register our strong support for this legislation and for the project. We're very excited about the new location. We are proud of the collaborative efforts that state leaders, local leaders, regional leaders, and government, business, and higher education, K-12, put forth in trying to land this huge investment. These new jobs are going to help offset more than 34,000 federal jobs that we lost in our area over the last 20 years due to BRAC sequestration and other federal cuts. Helps fill 2 million square feet of vacant office space we currently have in Crystal City. It's going to help further diversify our economy. We note that incentive package is structured to provide that 90% of the new jobs created are not in federal contracting, and we think that is very important in diversification. We're especially pleased that over half the incentive package Virginia has put forward is structured to grow the Commonwealth's tech talent pipeline and enhance transportation infrastructure while supporting Amazon's success. The investments in higher education are going to double the tech talent pipeline, producing 25,000 to 35,000 new graduates in computer science and computer engineering over the next 20 years, which are going to help power the workforce needs of tech companies in our region, but also across the Commonwealth, where many of our technology companies have locations and have employees. So we think that's a very important accomplishment. Over the past several years, our members have had growing concern about losing talented technology employees to other states, and we think this also will help to reverse that trend by creating thousands of high-paying jobs right here in the Commonwealth. So we are delighted to appear before you today and to register our strong support, and we certainly appreciate the patrons for putting this legislation forward.
Okay, thank you, Josh.
Mr. Chairman, the State Chamber of Commerce, Keith, is going to.
Okay, very good.
That will be the end.
Okay,
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name
Good
is
morning.
Keith Martin with Virginia Chamber of Commerce. As many of you know, the Chamber Foundation conducted a study of the Amazon proposal last fall, and the findings of our study stated that this is a transformational economic impact to our Commonwealth. It's transformational for our economy. It's transformational for economic development. It'd be transformational for our workforce and our tax revenues. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, we're very supportive of this bill.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've been corrected. The Arlington Chamber.
Arlington, well, very good. Arlington's right in the middle of this deal.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Brian Gordon with the Apartment and Office Building Association, but I am here today in my capacity as a member of the Arlington Chamber. They have asked me as well to register their strong support for this. We believe that this will help to diversify Northern Virginia's and the state's economy and also to serve as a catalyst for future economic development projects, and we hope for your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Ruff, I see other people that probably could speak, other representatives from Amazon, Stephen Murray, who led the negotiations for DEP, the Economic Development Partnership. But I think if those are all that are prepared to speak.
Well, I think that we all ought to applaud Stephen's hard work on this, but he's here to answer any questions.
Okay.
Any tough questions we can't handle.
All right. Senator Ruff, are you going to entertain any amendments to this at this time, or?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Holly, if we were to vote this down, could we go back to the table and get a sweeter deal?
I guess I could ask the same question. Just kidding.
Yeah, she's hard to negotiate with. Yeah.
No, we're
No.
really excited. This is,
Right.
as several people have said, I mean, 25,000 new jobs. Stephen Murray was fantastic to work with. The MEI Commission really has been working hard on this over the last year or two, so we really appreciate the support. And again, we have a long history here in Virginia, over 10,000 employees here, and we think this is just the next step in our continued partnership with the Commonwealth. So we
Okay.
really appreciate the support.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion properly supported to report the bill, that is Senate Bill 1255, as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, take the roll. Okay. Clerk, close the roll.
Yeas 13, no 0, 2 abstentions.
Yeas 13, no 0, 2 abstention. The bill is reported. Thank everyone who's participated in this project so far. Thank you. Okay. All right, we're going to, We're going to go ahead and I apologize to some of the members sitting here, although I think what you will hear will be helpful to you as well. We had intended to have Secretary Lane make his presentation up front on this. And so Secretary Lane, if you're prepared to make your remarks, we'll go ahead and take care of that before we move on any further bills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did make a promise to your co-chairman that I would not be loquacious today. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly as we go through. First of all, let me start by saying, as we go through this forecast and the update for December, the forecast has been changed to agree to the governor's introduced budget. That has been the history of how this is done. I certainly understand there are some disagreements between those revenues. It was not meant any other thing to say this is the way we've always done it. In fact, I thought I would reach out to the committee staff after this and talk about maybe in the future we just keep the Chapter 2 numbers in place or the budget in place until we have a change officially approved by the General Assembly. And I do have a slide at the end that actually compares us to where we are. So I just wanted to make that point out. It's not a political statement. It's just the way things have been done in the past. Well, we just go through today a few things, not only the December revenues, but I also had a request to talk about our debt and debt capacity, a partial federal shutdown, and I do have some comments to make. I heard yesterday regarding Hurricane Florence, and I'll end up with that as I go through this. As we look at where we stand, there's not a whole lot has changed over the last few months. The underlying economic parameters in Virginia are still strong. Our two largest generators of revenue, payroll, withholding, and sales tax, continue to increase. I've had to summarize it from the national level. We've had the budget that was signed as a tailwind. We've had the tax cuts that were signed as a tailwind. But we have a couple of things that are now staring us in the face a little bit greater than in the past. That is trade, particularly as it happens to deal with our China partners, but global trade in general, and of course the partial federal shutdown. The longer that goes on, the more impacts it's going to have in Virginia, and I will touch on that as we finish up. I get a lot of questions about the stock market volatility. I remind you that is a predictor of future economic activity some 18 months in the future. It is trending up. The volatility is up. The stock market's trending down. That is consistent with what we're hearing, not in this biennium, but maybe in 2020 we'll see a slowing of growth, but we have not seen that as we talk today. In Virginia particularly, things remain strong, as I mentioned. Most of the CEOs, there was a recent article in the Richmond Times-Dispatch saying that they are positive this coming year about jobs and sales. And I'll also point out that the Fed at the federal level has moderated its position on interest rates and said it'll now not just be a standard increase, but it'll look at how economic activity is going. So therefore, it appears, again, from what we're seeing at the national level, Virginia is trending right along with that. I will point out, in particular to trade, we're going through a major expansion at our Port of Virginia. If we were to have a disruption in trade, that could impact us there, particularly because we're depending on this increase to support the bonds necessary for the expansion. So not saying there's anything to worry about now, but something we need to keep our eyes on. If you look at our total general fund collections, while the underlying strength is in the economy in terms of payroll, withholding, and sales tax, we did have a decrease for the month, and that related to non-withholding. And I'll get to that a little bit more. But in last year, remember, we had an anomaly of about $300 million that we received in December. It appears we're going to receive those in coming months this year, and I'll speak more to that. So that shows us trending a little behind the revised forecast. But if you were to look at our Chapter 2, where we are with the current budget, the 1.5% is right on that forecast. So we did anticipate that we were not going to get the same collections in December for non-withholding as we did in the prior year. Again, if you look at withholding, a nice trend here. We're forecasting up. We're running at 4.5% compared to a forecast of 3.8%, an increased forecast of 3.8%. And we have not, as of yet, I'll point out, we have not seen any impacts, financial impacts from the partial federal shutdown. And I'll get to that a little bit later. That could impact us as we go further, but as of right now, that's not the case. If you'll recall, I had a slide last month that sort of evened out October and November because there was an extra payday in the October that reflected November. if you even it out, we've got a nice steady growth up, and would certainly hate to see anything that would impede that as we go forward. I don't see anything on the horizon other than this trade or potentially the shutdown could impact us here in Virginia. Here's the real story, and this is a policy-dependent revenue issue here. If you look at December of last year, we received $297 million of additional taxes paid for with non-withholding in December, what typically would have been paid in January or when the returns were filed. 781 people gave us that almost $300 million. This year, only 12 of them gave us $3.5 million. So clearly last year, they were taking advantage of the last year, they were ability to take the tax deduction for sales, state sales or income taxes on their federal return. We won't know the whole story about this until we get January receipts to see if people paid us on January 15th or possibly May 1st. Now, I will remind you, though, that in our budget, we have the collar. We put this as our most volatile revenue source, and we have limited it. So from the standpoint of economic activity, our economists are still showing a lot of wealth generation. So I don't see any reason to be alarmed at this right now. We anticipated it, but we won't know the whole story until we actually probably get to May 1st, when we actually have the returns filed. And again, January will give us a very good input. So this is what's causing our revenues to run behind. Obviously, the tax policy that you make going into this coming year, if you affect 18, that will reduce revenues, and I'm not suggesting that's good or bad, but the way the revenues flow will be dependent upon the tax policy that's ultimately agreed upon by the General Assembly. And non-withholding is probably where that will show up as we go forward. Looking forward to the other parts of individual income tax, we have seen no significant refunds, meaning that that money we got last year was from wealth generation. And as I said, our economic models again give us indications that that's going to continue. So overall, taking out the non-withholding anomaly, individual income tax is strong in the Commonwealth, I think reflecting the underlying economy. By the way, no additional revenues from Amazon are in here either. So, and that's all to come. So in that. Another good story we saw is the continued growth in sales tax. We had a very strong month in December, which reflects November Christmas sales. And so we read the anecdotal information in the paper. They said November was going to be good, and it was good for Virginia. I don't know how that's going to pan out in December. Most of the anecdotal information is December sales were off. Macy's, particularly Kohl's, others reported significantly lower than anticipated sales. Another impact here is we continue to see voluntary compliance with internet sales that are coming in here. So all things being equal, we'll see what December actually looks like in terms of the actual sales we see in January. But again, this reflects the continued strong growth we've been able to see in the underlying economy in our sales tax. Corporate collections were up briefly, or up for the month, although we're still running slightly behind year end in terms of the projection. This was a very significant month for corporate collections in December, and so therefore that is positive. So we'll see where we end up as we go through the year. I see nothing that would indicate that we would see anything significantly negative here. But again, that also could be impacted by any tax policy changes that the General Assembly does over the next few months. There are a couple of areas where we still are lagging. And the most significant one is in our recordation taxes. What I can say here, it's slightly bad news than we thought. In other words, we didn't go down as much as we thought we would do. And this happens to be related to sales of houses. They are still trending off in terms of the commonality refinancings. A lot of that had to do with interest rate increases, although if you're paying any attention to the bond markets over the last few weeks, that has gone down significantly. Mortgage rates are now around 4.5% again. They had gotten up over 5%. So hopefully we'll see this as we go through the spring season pick up, although we projected this decrease in the revenues going forward. And good news for the Transportation Trust Fund, We did complete the $168.7 million transfer into December for that trust fund out of the insurance proceeds, and we collected about the same amount of money from the insurance as we did last year, so things look to be on target there. When you add all this up, as you compare to the revised forecast, it's saying we're slightly behind. But if you look at the blue, which I think is the most important, you can see our underlying trends. Taking out withholding, we're up 4.3% to an estimate of 3.9%. So actually the underlying basics of our economy are showing in our receipts. And what I did, Mr. Chairman, this next slide is actually comparing it to the current Chapter 2 budget. In other words, the current revenues that's been approved by the General Assembly. And as you can see, we're right on that target. And again, our taking out non-withholding, we're trending up significantly to that target. So, Mr. Chairman, in terms of, or Co-Chairman, in terms of where we go from here, it's going to really be important to look at January receipts to see if we pick up what we did not get in December in non-withholding, and continue to look to see if we get the Christmas selling season for December showing up in our January sales tax receipts. So that will be the two things we'll be looking at as we go forward. Mr. Chairman, if there's, that sort of summarizes my overview of where we stand with revenues. If there's no questions, I'll continue on. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I did suggest to you that every quarter I would bring to your attention where we stand with some non-general fund revenues, particularly transportation. If you recall back in September, our motor fuels tax was showing up. And I said that had to do with an anomaly of the way people pay their taxes and how they settle up. Unfortunately, I was correct because now our motor fuel taxes are running behind our estimate substantially. The good news is motor vehicle sales have held up, and that is helping to offset some of the decline. And of course, we're benefiting in transportation with the increase in the retail sales taxes, because as you know, that some of that flows through to transportation. But the story is here that our motor fuels taxes continue to trend off. So if you look out forward, going forward, now this is just the state motor fuel taxes. You can see we're not anticipating any growth in this source. Now, this slide does not include a little, somewhere between 1 and 1.1 billion that we get from the federal sources, but again, that is not showing an increase either. So I point this slide out as to say we're not expecting any increase in this revenue source. Obviously, a lot has to do with that with the price of gasoline and fuel taxes, also the number of hybrids and electric cars that are on the road. In fact, if you look at this next slide, what it shows is for the first time in our history, we are seeing vehicle miles traveled escalating, going up, and yet no growth in our revenues from the the motor fuel taxes. I point this out, I believe, no pun intended, we're headed for a cliff because as more and more people switched away from gasoline, diesel, and diesel engines. We know that Ford and Volvo have mentioned in the years 2020 and forward, they're not going to make these type of vehicles anymore. This is something I just want to keep on your horizon as that we have to deal with going forward. Now, of course, what we've done is we've substituted, in order to build those lower taxes, we've substituted with tolls in order to build infrastructure across the Commonwealth. In fact, if you look today, we're collecting almost $750 million in tolling annually across the Commonwealth. And so that money is not available just for general sources. It's available to support and pay for the infrastructure that's actually there. In other words, a lot of this had to do with the public-private partnerships, and it would combine with the regional monies, particularly in Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia. That's how this infrastructure came into place. I wanted to just share this all with you because I know there's an important discussion in front of you regarding Interstate 81, to let you know where the revenue sources are and what we've been doing the last few years in order to get this infrastructure in place. So in terms of just an overview of transportation revenues, the key point is they remain flat while the usage of our roads and the wear and tear on them continues to go up. One of the things I was asked to talk quickly about was the debt overview, our debt capacity. Just a quick reminder, these are the types of debt that you typically issue. They regard general obligation debt, non-C, which are backed by revenues, but the full faith of the Commonwealth's general obligation pledge. But mostly you're doing non-D appropriation debt where you have those revenues, but it's appropriation back. You're not taking the full faith of the Commonwealth behind it. And that's particularly in our Virginia College Building Authority, our Virginia Public Building Authority, and of course the higher education debt is where most of that is. In fact, this is just an overview quickly of where you have the ability to issue other types of debt, capital projects that for a specific purpose without a revenue would require a referendum. You do that very selectively. And of course, in emergencies going forward, you have the ability to issue general obligation debt in that regard. But of course, most of it is in those first categories, which I went over quickly. And what we have, since for many years, the Commonwealth has adopted a debt capacity model where we limit the amount of debt that the General Assembly issues to 5% of blended revenues. In other words, the revenue, general fund revenues and transportation revenues, no more than debt can be issued than debt service can be supported to do not exceed 5%. And that is, I should point out here, that is a limiting factor which is positive for our bond rating, but that does not mean we have enough debt to pay for everything in the Commonwealth. In fact, much like our infrastructure and transportation, we would have to issue significantly more debt than 5% if we were going to cover all the requests in the Commonwealth. What happens is we make a recommendation to you and the governor, and you guys then decide if you want to follow it. Let me point out in the blended revenues, you see what's included, but it does not include any revenues this year related to tax policy. So in other words, anything that related to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, about the $1.1 billion or so that's in the budget, it is not in here. Most of that money is not recurring after a few years. We did not think it appropriate to use in the model to issue debt on. So I just want to point that out, that is not included in this year's model. A couple things could impact us as we go forward. It's not a static model. That is revenue estimates. Obviously, if we have lower revenues, that's going to reduce the amount of debt capacity we have. Policy changes could happen. It could affect us. But probably the things that impact us the most are the revision in interest rates. As they go up, that's going to decrease increase the carrying cost and therefore get us closer to 5% quicker. But one of the things that we're starting to see that we've had the luxury over the last few years is increase in prices. During the recession, we were getting a lot of projects coming under our estimates. That's no longer the case as the economy heats up. So we've got to be careful about where we stand on our estimates going forward and also impacts of interest rates. Now, again, this is a non-bonding recommendation. You, at your pleasure, could choose to exceed this, although, as I've mentioned, it would have ramifications, I do believe, in terms of our rating by the rating agencies in that. And as I mentioned, this does constrain the amount of debt that you have that's available. I mean, I'm not saying that we couldn't afford more, except this has been your policy going forward. And of course, you have the luxury of delaying or rescinding or adjusting the mix of those projects at any time. Now, if you look at these details, and I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but the base model says that we have substantially more available debt service. In fact, about $671 million a year. Now, this is over 10 years. This is a 10-year average. So the base model says we have over the next 10 years about $6.7 billion that could be issued. And in fact, what you have chosen to do in the past is to smooth that out and to look at over the next 10 years, you have about $670 million a year to stay within the 5% limit. You could bring it forward, some more of it forward, except that means in the out years you'd have none to deal with. So you traditionally have tried to smooth it going forward out for the next 10 years. So with the revenues that we currently have, we can afford about $670 million in additional issuance of debt over the next 10 years. And also pointing out again here that there are some impacts I think we need to be concerned about, and that's interest rates as they rise. For every 100 basis points or 1%, it would reduce us about $90 million roughly currently. That changes where we go. So if rates go up 1%, we would go from 671 down to 591 in that range. So I just wanted to, as we go through this, we obviously need to keep an eye on those rates. As I pointed out, we have $671 million available. However, in the governor's budget, we've only put in here $568 million. Obviously, you will have your ideas of what should go into that. What we used as priorities were life safety, maintenance of infrastructure, those that were the most significantly in need of being replaced. Obviously, we had some obligations for Amazon, H2Q in there. And then, of course, the governor did have some governor priorities. And I'm sure you will review that and make your own decisions of going that forward. I wanted to point out there is one additional amount of borrowing related to Radford University that is not that is in there that we're issuing that doesn't affect our debt capacity because they're paying for it. I just wanted to let you know, but that is in there as we go forward. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a brief overview of debt capacity, and just so you know where we are and how we got to where we are in the introduced budget and what you have available resources.
Okay, questions? Okay, you can
All
move right along.
Quickly want to move through the partial federal government shutdown. The only thing I can say about this is thank God it's not a total shutdown because we are having impacts from it as they grow. These are the agencies you see in front of you here that are not funded in that. And the Interior Department, Transportation. Now, Transportation Trust Fund is not impacted, but many of the employees in transit, for instance, are impacted. The one that impacts us the most directly is going to be agriculture if this goes on, and I'll explain as we go forward. But certainly Homeland Security and these others do have an impact. And I should point out there's an interrelationship. Even though, if you look at this next slide here, which shows you the agencies that are funded, and fortunately, Defense, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, military and veterans, which are very important to our state, are funded. Many of these non-funded agencies do help serve the purpose of these. For instance, Homeland Security is very much involved in defense. The Interior Department is very much involved at our port facility. So it may not be the agency itself, but those support are not funded. And that's causing us some issues. And I mentioned before, transportation is not directly impacted by this, although some of the people that are paid in the Transportation Department are. Now, what we've been doing to ascertain where we stand with this is have our Department of Planning budget reach out to our agencies and see how we are directly impacted by either grants or some employees that are funded by federal dollars or constituents. And so it's a work in process. I can say, as we said here today, I've seen no significant financial impact through December. But I do expect that's going to change as we go into the coming months as this goes on, and I'll get into that as to why that's the case. Primarily because we have 178,000 approximately federal employees that work in the state of Virginia. A little over 64,000 of those are impacted by agencies that are not working or are been paid by this shutdown. So about a little over a third of our federal employees, that's 1.5% of our workforce. If all of them were not getting paid, and I'll come back to that because some may find alternative sources, that's about $127 million in payroll each week. So obviously the taxes off, just the income taxes alone are $7 million, over $7.3 million a week. So if, in fact, these people were not to get paid, we're going to start seeing this show up. Now, as of last week, the Senate and House both passed a resolution to pay these employees once the government is reopened. It is said the president would sign that authorization. If that is true, it may just be a timing difference. In other words, we'll get the money eventually. But if that isn't true, then we're going to start seeing this show up. Now, a little bit about the individual employees. I have an update. As of this morning, we have 664 of these federal employees that have applied for unemployment benefits through our Virginia Employment Commission. We expect that number to go up. Now, all of them are not going to be eligible. If, in fact, and Mr. Chairman, Senator Norman, you asked me this question the other day. I've got an answer to it. If you are furloughed and are not required to work, you are eligible for unemployment benefits. If you are required to work, mission critical, and are not getting paid, you are not eligible for unemployment benefits. So, in fact, and I've heard anecdotally, I heard Senator Warner talk the other day. He estimated about half and half is our Virginia employees. So we have some 30,000 people that are working that are not getting paid and are not eligible for unemployment benefits. I should also remind you that federal workers do not pay into our unemployment benefits. They don't pay unemployment benefit taxes. The way it works is if you are eligible, we give the unemployment benefits, and typically what's happened in the past, if they are funded fully when their government opens, the federal government, they pay us back. So they do pay us back. We work out payment plans or with them as we go back. This may be more impactful. This is the largest shutdown in our nation's history now of the federal government. Depending on how long this goes, that could be something that we may have to bring to your attention.
Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Aubrey, when these furloughed workers that are drawn state unemployment receive the back pay, presuming they do, how do they track them down? Is it on a voluntary basis? It looks like it's going to be an incidental cost in trying to recover that amount.
Yes, sir. I believe it is on an individual basis, not the federal government reimbursing us. It is us having to go. I have been told from the Virginia Employment Commission the employees are very willing to do that, and we've not had this large amount maybe for this long. So I can't answer exactly how that's going to play out going forward. But it is right now we have 664 that we would have to go make arrangements with as we go forward. I did receive, I thought this was interesting. I got from the Coast Guard, it was been talked about in the national news. They sent out a letter telling all these mission critical people how there's a way they could supplement their income and have a garage sale or become a mystery shopper or be a dog walker. I mean, I actually think that's pretty sad that that's the instructions we're given. I wasn't sure I was going to share that, Mr. Chairman, but I just find out these people are hurting. I'll put it that way. Some other incidental things that we're having impactful. Federal parks are closed and not staffed. Some of them are open, but we're no trash collection and stuff, so we're having to deal with that. And I should point out here, we do not have the authority at the executive level to supplant federal revenues with state revenues without your approval. So there are no plans to do that without working with you guys. I'm just trying to give you, as we go forward, that may be something. I don't want to be too prescriptive because I don't want the federal government to think we can cope with this, because the first thing we'll know, they'll be telling us, well, you didn't need that. So, but I wanted to make that clear. There are no plans to do that, nor should there be, without working with the General Assembly. The Virginia Resources Authority has had loans, at least one they can't close because there's nobody at rural development. Our Internal Revenue Service has said they're going to open the window. They just called back 40,000 some employees to begin opening that window at the end of the month, but they will not answer questions. They will take the return and they will issue a refund. But as you know, at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, there's a lot of questions, so I don't know if we're going to get a lot of help out of that. Now, if this goes on past February, this is when we're going to see some very significant financial impacts related to grants. And it primarily relates to the SNAP program, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program, and our WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. That's about $100 million a month. And right now, it's funded through the end of February. And so we're watching that because, as you know, I've seen several cities, Virginia Beach being one, they're already anticipating that and issuing February recipients their monies early so that hopefully they can tide this over when we get there. This is the most significant one that I think we need to keep an eye on, because that would affect a great deal of many of our constituents. Now, a few other things that we do know, or what we don't know, for instance, I know government contractors are not getting paid. I don't know how many in Virginia, but typically in these shutdowns, they do not get reimbursed. So government contractors do not get reimbursed. They just move that particular work order forward. But of course, I don't know the psychological impact of people not getting paid and therefore not buying. So we could have an impact from that perspective. I should point out, this is not a Northern Virginia central type of effect. Most of these are spread throughout the state because of the type of agencies that are impacted. So this is not just Northern Virginia centric. Probably the one that concerns me the most is the public safety aspect. We have the areas of the TSA individuals at airports and the Coast Guard, mission critical people that are having to work without pay. We've had anecdotal information that many are calling in sick, many are not showing up. Obviously, it could be a public safety issue, and I don't know of any issues particularly in Virginia. As this goes on, quite frankly, obviously that's going to strain these critical missions as we go forward. I find it interesting, the shutdowns about whatever side you're on about border security, well, not manning our ports is where most of the problems come. And so hopefully they can find some agreement as we go through here. So in wrapping up this particular section, just wanted to give you an overview of what was going on in Virginia, potential actions to be taken. I don't want to be prescriptive, Mr. Chairman, because I don't want to insinuate that Virginia is somehow dealing with this and the federal government doesn't have to live up to its obligations. But certainly one of the things we will have to start doing is notifying constituents as we get closer to impacts as we go forward. So if there's any questions about that, Mr. Chairman, I have one more quick topic that I got a request on, and I'll move on to that.
All right.
And that was, I did get a request from your staff yesterday to do a brief update on Hurricane Florence. Let me point out on the cost of that. Let me point out, Mr. Chairman, that the way this works is the costs are at the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, and then DPB reviews those or they're submitted. As you know, the governor issued a sum sufficient order of $60 million. We know we're not going to spend that in gross terms, and we know we're going to get reimbursed. But as of today, from what we've gotten from VDEM and from the Department of Planning and Budget, there was roughly about $49 million in statewide impacts. That includes local and the state impacts. Of that amount, roughly $43 million was the state, and I can give you the exact numbers, $43,365,000, but roughly $43 million was what was impacted and paid at the state. Obviously, the greatest amount of that had to do with the shelter, almost $32 million that are related to the sheltering and the shelter direct cost of that project. There was transportation was $1.2 billion. That bus contract that obviously did not end up being used, but was contracted for, available because we didn't have to do the evacuation. And the rest of it has to do with other state agencies, and I can go to be specific, but the majority of it was in those two contracts in that. In terms of the question of what has been reimbursed, as of to date, I know of nothing that's being reimbursed from other states, even though I do believe there will be some. The Virginia Department of Emergency Management does say that they spent somewhere around $680,000 that they're going to invoice North Carolina for regarding National Guard and other costs associated with switching some of our facilities there. So as of to date, I don't know of anything that we've been reimbursed, but I don't know that we've billed for it either based on the report I got from the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. So that's a brief overview. I'm happy to go more questions if there are any, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The other day in one of the subcommittee meetings of finance, we were going over the budget, and the issue about these emergency funds came up. and understand that currently the governor has some pretty broad discretion on that. What is your best advice that you can give to this committee as to how we avoid that financial exposure going forward?
Mr. Chairman, during the time of the emergency is not the time that we should have been assessing this. In other words, given the choices the governor was given, evacuation and how we do that, I think we made the only choice we could. To answer your specific question, this game was lost well before that because of our ability to react to this and have alternative plans in place. In other words, we have now done a review. We had the state of Louisiana come up, work with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. But there should have been, in my estimation, and I may not be speaking for the governor's office in this regard, but we should have had alternative choices at our disposal. And I think you'll see some of the things in the budget, that's what we have directed, or that the governor's direction going forward. At the time, making that evacuation, the only option given was this contract. And at the time, the decision was made, it was better to be prepared in the middle of this emergency than not. But quite frankly, there should have been other options that were available to the governor in making that decision. So I think the best way to avoid that is to have better options on the table, and it needs to be an integrated process, not just the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. Obviously, Department of other social services and stuff we can shelter. That needs to be an integrated approach.
Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tell me, as of this very moment, how much progress has been made in developing an alternative approach so that we do not find ourselves in a situation where we have these cohesion contracts that we have to accept?
Mr. Chairman, I know there was a review that I participated with with the Louisiana Department of Emergency Management in terms of making suggestions and how we could do this. I cannot answer how much has been enacted. That would be the Virginia Department of Emergency Management if we need to answer that question.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Norman.
Then because of your network and your pervasive knowledge of all these subjects, I would encourage you to have them give a report to the Senate Finance Committee on how much progress they have made in an alternative emergency approach as of this day.
Yes, sir. I will pass that on.
Okay. Other questions for the Secretary? Ms. Secretary, we appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time
Mr.
this
Chairman.
morning in a
Thank
lot
you
of
very much.
areas and in your report, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. All right, we're going to jump quickly now into our docket. I appreciate the patience of those who've been waiting for bills. Senator Cosgrove, you were up first. Senator Cosgrove.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have
Morning.
Senate Bill 1023.
Okay.
There are two other bills that are very similar to this.
Right, and
listed
we have you all coordinated it all, Senator Suderline and
We have.
Senator Stewart, perhaps?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We've agreed to roll that into, those bills into 1023 with all three of us being chief co-patrons.
Okay.
All right.
And have you communicated with staff on that? Lisa specifically, she was going to try to work something?
I have not yet, but
Okay,
I know Lisa and she can handle anything. So.
okay. Who, have y'all? Okay, okay. We had, as we had reviewed this, Senator Cosgrove, we had had a couple proposed amendments in a substitute, but we hadn't rolled them together yet because we weren't sure which one we were going to go with the lead one.
Well,
Y'all-
if you might want, if Senator Stewart certainly is a member of the committee.
Okay. Mr. Stewart?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senator Cosgrove has a lower number
Okay.
than either I.
We'll roll them all three together and as chief patrons?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move
Coach,
that the bills be rolled into Senator Cosgrove's and that we all be listed as chief co-patrons.
Okay.
Being that he's the lower number in this. And
Okay.
I think all three of them are identical. You have any
All right.
objection to that?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Y'all want to explain then the purpose of the bills?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We know that school safety has become a very, very hot issue, one that has always been an important issue. And we are in desperate need in the Commonwealth, in our schools, for more school safety officers. This bill would allow retired police officers who have been sworn police officers after their retirement to go to work for a school system in a non-benefited position, all right? So basically, they would retire, from the police force with full retirement, and then they could then work, as they can now for 28 hours a week, by the way, they could then work for a school system as a school security officer. They have the training, they've been to police academy, they had the on-the-street experience, they have the personal skills, and these folks could step right in and do that job. So that's the bill. I know there's been some quandary about the VRS give and take of it, but I'll leave that to the wisdom of this committee.
Okay. All
But
right.
as I said before, they can work for the school now, but just 28 hours.
Right.
And not the extra 12 that would bring them into full-time status.
Okay, I'll share one thought that we had talked about here. The VRS, some of the VRS concern came from the fact that this change in policy might basically incentivize early retirements for people to go ahead and make that decision to retire. And we were looking at the possibility of saying, well, you're establishing a date where they would have retired, say they were retired effective, the end of last year or something like that. Would that fit your purpose?
That would be fine. The only thing I'd ask you, Mr. Chairman, is that as I read the substitute language, it says anybody retired after, or I'm sorry, prior to July 1st, 2018. Right. Does that mean we have to come back each year and change the date?
Okay.
I
It would
think-
seem like maybe that language could be finessed somehow.
Mr. Chairman, I
I'm
think
not sure.
it-
Lisa, how did you draw that?
Mr. Chairman, I had drawn it to say honor after, they had to retire honor before July 1, 2018, based on our discussion. I think an alternative approach, because you would have to come back and amend the date from time to time, might be to say that this option's only available if somebody has full retirement from a law enforcement.
Or maybe for a period
System.
of 1 year.
For a period of
after
1 year,
retirement- After
perhaps.
retirement, because that then,
Could that work?
I'm not even sure, we want to go a year break?
I don't, but I want to get the bill passed.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, first, let's take action. We need a recorded vote to roll the bills together. Is there a motion that they, all right, as such? Okay. All right, clerk, open the roll on that.
Bill, vote
Oh.
right there.
Senator Donovan's covered or not? Okay.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Ayes 15, no zero. The bills are rolled together.
And Mr.
Whereas
Chairman, can
all-
Senator Stewart address his concern?
Well, I don't know that I'm the authority to address it, but the issue is, I mean, we've got a real problem in the school systems, and I don't have to tell you all because you know about it. And this is a very practical solution. We don't want to incentivize early retirement, and I get that concern. If we're going to have to require a break, could we maybe require a short break? Let's evaluate that and see how it goes, and if it's determined that it is incentivizing early retirement, we can come back and adjust it next year rather than going to the extreme. We want this bill, don't misunderstand
Sure,
what I'm saying,
sure.
and I'd rather have something
Sure.
than nothing, and I know how this works. But I'd rather err on the low side of a break in service
Mm-hmm.
versus going to the extreme of a year, because there's a real need for this out there.
Okay.
We need these folks in the school systems, it's gotten dangerous. It's not like when you and I went to school.
Right, right.
And we need these folks in there.
And I personally agree with you. I was going to file a bill until I saw the three of y'all already had, so this is
And I
good.
think that there are also folks here who might like to address this, the whole concept and particularly the break in service as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator McDougal.
And maybe Lisa knows this, do I recall that the IRS requires some sort of break around 60 days? Is that my,
60 days would be great. We
That would
could
go
do that.
I
That would be a
don't.
good number.
I'm relying on memory, which is never good, but,
Mr. Chairman, I know IRS does require a break. I can't remember if it's 60 or 90, and so somebody from VRS might be able to correct us on that. But I know the issue is that there cannot be any evidence that one has retired with kind of a plan in place to come immediately back into service under a different contract. So there does need to be what they refer to as a bona fide break in service.
Senator Norman?
I asked a question, I have no idea what the answer is, which is dangerous, but is there any compelling reason for us to exceed the minimum break that the IRS is requiring?
I don't think so.
No, sir, I don't see any reason at all. If we are in compliance with the IRS code and we can get these officers in the schools.
Well, let
I
me
think that's what we
ask my
should do.
lawyer. Lisa, are you aware of any compelling reason we should exceed the IRS exclusionary period?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer an amendment in concept that whatever that federal IRS requirement is for the exclusionary period, that's what will be reflected in the bill.
Second.
Okay.
And I appreciate that amendment.
Motion properly supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that amendment is adopted. I think, and I don't want to short circuit this, but I know there are a lot of advocates here. Is VRS here?
Somewhere.
Patricia? Tricia, are you here? All right.
There she is.
Look at them Okay.
glasses she got on, man.
All right, if you could come up, certainly we're trying to address the concern that y'all had voiced. What's your thought now?
Sure. In general, the Internal Revenue Code doesn't specify a specific break in service. They require that there be no prearrangement and that there be a bona fide break in service. And it is defined essentially by the respective system and their plan document. In a similar case for the critical shortage for teachers, which has existed, the one-year break in service has been used. And the reason why we use a one-year break in service is because you want to avoid the prearrangement, which could be construed as impeding your qualified plan status. And also, one of the reasons why we've used a one-year break in service is because changes in retirement patterns can have impacts on the funded status. Because if you have more folks retire than expected, we pay benefits for longer, and it could impact contributions as well as funded status. So that's the concept behind the one-year break in service.
Okay, Senator Norman.
I have a very serious question. Where did you get those glasses?
Cork Gallery, you can get them. They have a large selection.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Kirko.
Real quick, so when you talk about security officers, you're not talking about anyone with any sworn police powers, just someone that works in the school system for security, right? Because there is a difference.
Correct.
If they retire for whatever reason, if they're given sworn ability back, right?
Yeah, my understanding of there's a difference between the school resource officer, who is an employee of the local law enforcement agency, versus a school security officer, which is an employee of the school divisions, and their powers are set forth a little bit differently in statute. And the impact statement goes into sort of the differences between the two, but you're correct, sir.
Okay. It would appear,
Yeah, if I might, I just, instead of having a whole bunch of people parade up here, I know that your time is valuable. The people that are here in support of this, Prince William Schools is in support, Virginia Beach and Chesapeake Public Schools support, the Sheriff's Association is in support, the Fraternal Order of Police is in support. This is a common sense bill that in Stafford County is in support. This is a bill that meets an immediate need, and it's something that we've been talking about doing, and it's time to do it.
okay. State Police also, okay. Is there anyone here in opposition to the bill? All right. What I would suggest is that, we have an amendment that's been adopted. It seems like there's broad support for this concept. At least if y'all could just talk to VRS and decide in the process whether or not the one-year break is advisable and whether or not it would hurt what you are trying to do. And, you know, if you want to bring an amendment to the floor after that or in the House, somewhere in the process.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll look at that. I will say there was one other amendment offered by VRS, and that was a change in the bill in line 104, change chapter to title.
Do what?
To change chapter to title on line 104.
Mr. Chairman, I've captured those technical amendments in the summary.
Technical amendment, okay. All right, it appears then, Senator Norman, do you have something else?
No, sir, I was just going to move to report it as amended, sir.
Okay, all right, there's a motion properly supported that the bill, the combined bills carrying the number 1023 as amended be reported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk open the roll. Clerk. Clerk, close the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the bill is reported unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all for that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, Senator Deeds.
I've got Senate Bill 1480, and it's a bill you've seen a bunch of times in the past. I've got a little handout with some information.
Okay, Senate Bill 1480, Virginia Law Officers
Basically,
Retirements.
it would do,
For conservation
the
officers.
people that work in our state parks, that run our state parks, I think there are 94 of them in all, that have law enforcement authority, would put them in the Valor's program. Now, if we're going to attract and retain the best people to do this important work, we've got to up the ante for them. We've got to give them more benefits. And this bill isn't really about that. It's about fairness, because the people they're educated with, the people they're trained with, and now the people that do the same job they do but do it at Breaks Interstate Park have the same, they're in Valor's. So this is about fairness. It's about treating employees situated in a similar setting, treating them the same way. There are a number of people here that want to talk about this. As I said, you've seen this bill a bunch in the past. In 2008, Jay Lark said this was the right thing to do, and that was 11 years ago. This is something that is very simple in my view. But
And
there are some people here that want to speak.
okay, do you want to have a couple representatives of this position step forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and honorable ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to speak today on behalf of Senate Bill 1480. I was getting to that, but I'm Tim Kennel. I'm from Cumberland, Virginia. Do appreciate you allowing me to speak today on behalf of Senate Bill 1480, which is the inclusion of conservation officers of the Department of Conservation and Recreation as members of the Virginia Law Officers Retirement System, or VALORS. As I said, my name is Tim Kennel, and I am the president of the nonprofit, unpaid 501c3 Virginia Association for Parks, or VAFP, with over 4,000 members across the Commonwealth. In 2008, the J. Lark report entitled Review of State Employee Total Compensation supported the inclusion of conservation officers of the Department of Conservation and Recreation in VALORS. Since that time, VML and VACO have both supported the action, and they support the inclusion of our conservation officers in VALORS because our conservation officers are expected to protect and preserve the lives and the properties of our citizens and visitors while protecting the unique and irreplaceable natural and cultural resources across the Commonwealth. It's just a tremendous job, a huge job. Our conservation recreation officers are charged with protecting some 104 sites and 125,252 acres, representing 41 state park sites of over 70,000 acres and 61 natural area sites, some 55,352 acres. All the while, our visitation continues to grow with over 10,500,000 total visitors and 1,233,779 overnight visitors in 2017. Our concern is our ability to hire and retain quality conservation officers now and in the future because of our inability to compete with other law enforcement agencies' benefits programs. The Department of Conservation and Recreation is an accredited law enforcement agency by the Virginia Law Enforcement Professional Standards Commission. DCR and ABC are the only statewide law enforcement agencies so accredited, and the ABC is already covered by Valor's. Right now, at this very moment, we have 8 new officers attending the same class in Salem, Virginia, the same training, the same testing as several county and cities working side by side for the same certification with one exception. Our officers are not eligible for the Virginia Law Enforcement Officers Retirement System. The new news this year is that the Breaks Interstate Bi-State State Park, located partly in southeastern Kentucky, but mostly in southwestern Virginia, has added their conservation officers to the Law Enforcement Officers Retirement System. It's no wonder we lose our conservation officers to other law enforcement agencies. You and I expect the same protection and skill levels from our DCR officers as other agencies and hold them to the same standards. But they don't have the enhanced sense of equitability when compared to other law enforcement officers across the Commonwealth. Yes, the $426,700 that we're asking for in both years 1 and 2 are a significant investment. But think about it. The Virginia Department of Highways says it costs $800,000 a mile to build a tar and gravel road in Virginia to VDOT standard. I'm just asking for 5,280 feet of tar and gravel to fund our inclusion of the conservation officers of DCR into Valor's.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. See, a couple more people, we need to be pretty brief now, if we could.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Hanger and honorable members of this committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Bonnie Klakowitz. I am a retired art educator, but I'm also a park wife. I have been married to my husband for a number of years, and I spent 30 years living in state parks, and so I think I have a little bit of a different perspective here. I am absolutely in favor of Senator Dee's Senate Bill 1480. So being a park wife for 30 years during my husband's professional career, we lived in many state parks. As you know, state park visitors expect safety during their visits. Conservation officers provide on-site police protection around the clock. And in order to do this, they are required to live on or near the property that is owned that provides state housing. Conservation officers have full arrest powers, are primary law enforcement providers on DCR properties, and they are already legally defined as law enforcement officers by the Code of Virginia. And I've already heard about DCR. It is important to recruit and retain people to stay in the park system. But I want to give you a few personal stories. In 1980, and a few of you were around then, but in 1980, my husband was promoted to assistant park manager at Claytor Lake State Park. At that time, he was basically a ranger who carried his service revolver around in his glove compartment of his park truck. About that time, a motorcycle gang, the Pagans, decided to hang out at the park. They came in, they hid their booze and drugs in the woods and played around with their whips in public spaces. and park guests were not amused. They did this for nearly an entire summer. They would even camp there on occasion. And as my husband was the assistant manager, he had night duty. So many, many nights, and we had small children, he was out in the campground keeping the pagans from disturbing the other guests. Along with his other law enforcement officers during that time, they were able to get together and come up with a plan and persuade pagans to go elsewhere for their fun. But it was chilling to hear the account of his encounters, and it was very worrisome for myself and other park families with their husbands going out at night to deal with this type of situation and waiting for them to return. By the time he was promoted to manager, we were at Sky Meadow State Park and then at Lee, Sylvania. By that time, the conservation officers were required to attend the police academy, and he was required to dress every day in his bulletproof vest and carry his gun. While our park was under construction, he was the only one living on the park property as caretaker, and he was the one who was called out from the security service in the middle of the night to go check on the status of a security alarm going off. Other spouses of law enforcement officers know what it's like to wake up, have your husband leave the house, and not know when he is coming back. And at that time, there were not even cell phones. Lee, Sylvania has one of the most heavily used boat ramps in all of Virginia. In the early 1990s, when the park first opened, my husband and his fellow conservation officers worked long hours to check on boaters returning to the park to go home. Many, many were too drunk to get their boats out of the water and drive home safely. Do you know how much time it takes for someone for a DUI, to arrest someone for a DUI, and the steps you need to take to get them properly arrested and charge them? On many weekends, an 8-hour day turned into a 12 to 16-hour day. Doing their job took them away from their families and for many more hours than they were compensated for. I must also tell you that due to this rigorous campaign and having all hands on deck and being firm and consistent in this policy, Lee, Sylvania today seldom has a drinking under the influence arrest. Just like when he was confronting the pagans and other officers that were helping, this dedication made park guests feel safe. Their action paid off. And I dare say they saved lives in taking this action. It is time that Virginia recognize the value of having these highly trained and highly qualified professionals that are men and women in the State Park Service eligible for valors. Please support Senate Bill 1480 so they may have the same benefits. I appreciate you listening to me today.
Thank you very much. Okay.
One more person, he's just going to be
Just a few seconds, okay.
You can time me, I'll be under 30 seconds. My name is Vivek Patil. I'm an Arlington resident and a member of the Board of Conservation and Recreation. And witness to the remarkable professionalism of the officers, I'd like to express my strongest support to this bill, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone here to speak in opposition to this bill? Senator Deeds, as you're well aware, bringing this bill forward, you and I have worked on a lot of initiatives in support of the state park system over the past together, but I've never voted for this.
Most years, we haven't had any money either.
Right.
This year, we do.
Well, I'm inclined, rather than just stopping it here as we've done in the past, maybe to put the clause on it and see if we do have money. Is anyone else interested in that? What's the pleasure of the committee? Okay. All right, there's a motion to attach the financial contingency clause. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, what's the pleasure on the bill? Second. There's a motion properly supported to report the bill as amended. Clerk, open the roll.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Senator Dees. Okay, and those who were here in support of it. Appreciate it. Okay, Senator Edwards.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 1301 was requested by the city of Roanoke. What this does is simply amend the code provision that allows the treasurers of any locality to engage private collection agents for the collection of local taxes within a 3-month period of delinquency. This would add to local taxes, quote, other amounts due to the locality that are delinquent. Current law allows these other accounts due to the locality to be collected after waiting 6 months. The city of Roanoke believes that we need to have it to allow the treasurer to employ private collection agents to move forward after 3 months. Of course, written notification would be given to the delinquent person. There are many matters that are owed localities besides taxes, and Evelyn Powers, the treasurer of the city of Roanoke, is here to explain it further.
Okay. All right, we'd be pleased to hear some brief remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Hanger and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I'm here to speak in support of Senate Bill 1301. My name is Evelyn Powers. I am the treasurer for the city of Roanoke, and I am the president of the Virginia Treasurers Association, who also is in support of this bill. As Senator Edwards has explained, many of these other charges are businesses. There could be a few localities, but they're businesses that have asked for services from our city. For example, I'll give you false fire and police alarms. Our city currently asks these businesses to register with the city so that we have the information of their systems. We give them 5 free false alarms. After that, the city starts charging for those fees because these businesses have not taken care of their security systems. And so sometimes we could get our police or fire department, more often our fire department, could get called out anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week. And as you very well know, the cost of sending out that fire truck is enormous. So the city then assesses a charge for that. What we're finding is that having to wait 6 months, even in that 6 months' time, we have sent these people 7 notices, plus we've made phone calls, tried to collect it, and unsuccessful. So with currently, if it's a delinquent tax, we can use the outside agencies to help us, but we can't send non-taxes, so we have to wait 6 months. Even in that 3-month period, we've sent these people 4 invoices. So as I'm stating, these are services that they've asked our locality for, and they're just not paying us. So if we had this law in place that we could just replace that 6 months to 3 months, as we're using our outside agency now, and we're sending a tax, it could be the same company that also owes us a non-tax, so we could send it all at one time. But what we're finding out is these businesses close up, leave our region, move, and we just can't collect it. And so it's not really fair that these people won't pay when we have people that will pay. So I ask for your support in this bill, and as I've stated, the Virginia Treasurers Association is in support of this, and I don't think there's anybody really opposing this. And I welcome any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this bill? We saw this bill last year, and actually,
It was a little different last year, I believe.
we didn't like it last year for some reason.
It was a little different last year.
It was in a different section. This is 3919 that just addresses we're just adding other charges. The other section had something to do with what they called a hostile takeover of the treasurers. But either of these bills has to be, it's at the discretion of the elected treasurer. The treasurer would have to be in support of this for their locality before we'd even do it. And as I said, we're already using outside collection agencies to help us with taxes. This just gives us the ability to include everything that, say, John Doe owes the locality, instead of having to wait 3 more months and then try to get that. But, it just allows us, if this bill passes, I can tell you we could collect more of our money a lot quicker.
Okay. So the effective impact of this bill, Senator Edwards, is that the authority they currently have to do after 6 months delinquency would move up 3 months.
3 months, and
For
and
non-taxes.
for non-taxes.
Right, for non-taxes.
Right now, they can go
which
for
char-
taxes,
instead of
but not for
charges.
non-taxes.
All right, what's the pleasure of the committee on this measure?
Like I say, the Treasurers Association, as my understanding, does support it.
Some of these charges are what we also.
Is there a
pay for
motion
the state.
either way? Not hearing a motion. Not hearing a motion to support, is there a motion to PBI? Okay. Senator Wagner, did you make a PBI? Was there a second to that? Second. Motion properly supported to pass the bill by indefinitely. Any further discussion?
So what did they do?
Hearing none, all those, clerk open the roll. Motion is to PBI.
Bring it back next week. Work with the committee.
Clerk close the roll.
Ayes 10, noes 6.
Ayes 10, noes 6. Senator Edwards, the bill is PBI. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there are other parties that are interested, but there are two bills dealing with new definitions on tobacco-related products. It's Senate Bill 1252 with Senator Reeves and Senate Bill 1371 with Senator Norman. I would respectfully ask that those two bills be passed by for the day, sir.
Okay. All right, we certainly will honor that. All those in favor of that, was there a second to that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, those bills are passed by for the day. Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Mr. Chair, I think it might be appropriate if Senator Eben is with me. We have similar bills, although they do
Okay.
have a distinct difference, which I can explain.
All right, give your attention to Senator Peterson and Senator Eben for their
Thank you.
bills.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, mine is Senate Bill 1116-1116. This is the plastic bag tax, which I've carried every year since at least the first term of the Obama administration. Basically, what it would do is place a 5-cent tax on plastic bags, which are allocated in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It would be mandatory for, again, plastic bags that are used by grocery stores, convenience stores, and drugstores. Basically, the way the tax works is every plastic bag that is utilized, there's a 5-cent tax that comes along with it. Of that 5 cents, 1 penny goes back to the retailer for their costs of collection, and then the other 4 cents goes to the Water Quality Improvement Fund. So that's why it's a direct relation to Chesapeake Bay watershed. I've given this presentation every year. I'll just hit on a couple statistics, then I have people that will like to speak in favor of it. The average U.S. citizen uses 320 plastic bags per year. Approximately 98% of those are not recycled, which means they end up in landfills or waterways. I think everyone's seen the impact this has on our waterways of all this plastic waste. My bill is very user-friendly. And I know this, Mr. Chairman, from my own personal experience. I was actually out in Colorado playing in a rugby tournament back in September. After a match, I walked in to buy a Gatorade, and I bought it on a self-checkout, and they actually had a thing, you either hit yes or no for a plastic bag. I hit no, so they did not assess the 5 cents. I paid via credit card, and I walked out of there. And there was no infringement on my freedom as an American. I walked away not having paid the tax. And the citizens of Colorado obviously decided to pass this, or their legislature did, and I didn't see anyone in open revolt. So, Mr. Senator Eben's bill is slightly different from mine. Mine is only plastic.
Okay.
His is deals with other products, but that's the sum and substance of what I do.
Okay, and y'all requesting we hear them both at the same time? You want Senator
I think
Evans
that
to
would be
speak to-
more efficient.
Right, okay.
Yeah, the reason, I'll just say briefly why we've got paper in there also, is one of the largest supermarket chains in the country approached me when I first put in this bill, which was my first year in the Senate when Senator Norman voted for it, which was, and they asked me to include paper because apparently to transport the plastic bags to a supermarket, they're much lighter, but they're the main problem. And they said paper costs them a lot more to transport. Plus, paper is actually has its own complications in recycling with a lot of chemicals and other things that are not as environmentally friendly, not to do any damage to the forestry industry. But that is the one of the differences with Senator Peterson's bill. The others is mine is local option throughout the state. His is Chesapeake Bay watershed. And I'll just tell you briefly, because Senator Peterson has some witnesses. I've got one in particular. As you probably remember from past years, the bag doesn't apply to a number of the fee does not apply to a number of kinds of bags, including those newspaper bags that people like to use to clean up after their dogs. We know that 97 to 99% of plastic single-use bags end up in our landfills or waterways with only 1 to 3% recycling. I think people still would recycle those others. But it's the second most commonly found litter pollution source in Virginia. And I've got a witness about the marine animal life. And we know from the experience of other states that this has been successful, whether it's in DC, 50% reduction in plastic bag use, 70% reduction in plastic bag litter in the Anacostia, Potomac, and Potomac rivers. But what's really interesting in San Jose is that they demonstrated a dramatic reduction in bag litter of 89% in the storm drain system and 60% in creeks and rivers, and similarly in city streets and neighborhoods. And DEQ recommended in a 2015 report that legislation that aims to reduce commonly found land-based plastic pollution, such as bags. Lastly, there's an impact to the retailer. You'll hear from retailers who might not support it, but they would keep 20% of the fee in both Senator Peterson's and my bill. And I know CHAP has some witnesses, and I've got one in particular as well.
Senator Wagner has a question, I believe. Senator Wagner?
Just a question for either patron. Can you tell me, would food stamps cover this? If I use food stamps to make the purchase, would that food stamps cover the cost?
I don't know, but I would think not, because food stamps have strict regulations about what you're allowed to buy with it, and you're not allowed to buy certain products, even food products, I think. But I can't say that for certain.
Okay, just trying to clarify.
It does not cover non-food products, to my knowledge.
Take those with the least amount of money and charge them some more.
Okay, okay. All right, let's, if we have a couple brief presentations, that would be fine. Got someone there, I see.
Let me just, if I could say, if every single one was to pay a tax, it'd be $6, so. Who's, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Neil Minks representing VML. I was asked to read a two-sentence a position that VML has taken in its legislative program, that the organization supports bills to allow local option authority to develop incentives or regulations to decrease or otherwise regulate the distribution, sale, or offer of disposable plastic bags. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Other?
Good morning, Senators, and thank you for letting me speak with you today. I'm Julie Kimmel. I'm the co-chair of an environmental advocacy group called 350 Fairfax, and I'm here today representing our 700-plus members in Fairfax County who support both SB 1070 and SB 1116, and we'd like to see legislation that reduces single-use plastic pollution in the Commonwealth, particularly in our neighborhood streams. Reducing litter has been shown to reduce crime in neighborhoods. It can, in turn, attract home buyers, tourists, and businesses. It can raise property values and increase job opportunities. And these are improvements that everyone wants to see in their communities, especially moms like me who are concerned about their kids' safety and futures. And really quickly, I'd like to address two myths that we heard last year when we came to talk on behalf of Senator Peterson's bill. First, we heard that retailers would flounder under the tax, and they won't. Retailers already pay for plastic bags and pass that expense on to their customers. It's just not obvious to the public. By making a fee explicit, retailers can minimize their bag expenses, and people can choose whether to use a disposable bag or not. And second, we heard that plastic bags are sterile, whereas reusable bags harbor unsafe bacteria. Yes, the American Chemistry Council invested in studies that found high rates of bacteria in reusable bags, but the bacteria found was not actually harmful. According to Consumer Reports, a person eating an average bag of salad greens gets more exposure to these bacteria than if they had licked the insides of the dirtiest bags from the study. So please consider these bills carefully. Either one would go a long way toward cleaning up plastic pollution in Virginia. Thank you.
Otherwise, I see we have a number of people that are interested in speaking. If you could just be very brief as possible.
Chairman Norman, Chairman Hanger, and members of the committee. My name is David Millman, and I'm a senior at St. Christopher's High School in Richmond, Virginia. I'm also the chairman of the Environmental Youth Council of Virginia, a coalition of passionate students from high school across the state, including St. Christopher's, St. Catherine's, Deep Run, Powhatan, Lee Davis, Clover Hill, Carver College and Career Academy, Open, Trinity, and Maggie Walker Governor's School. And our group is fully in support of Senate Bill 1070 and by extension, Senator Peterson's bill. We all know that plastic pollution is terrible for the environment because plastic is not biodegradable. But many don't know that the plastic that makes its way into the ocean doesn't just stay like a bag floating around. It breaks up into tiny pieces called microplastics and harms millions of sea animals around the world. Microplastics can't be removed from the water once they are broken down. The problem is already to the point where if we removed all the plastic floating on the ocean, the majority of plastic would remain. As a matter of fact, I've done research into microplastics in Richmond, and I've found microplastics in the James River. Chances are, if you live near a body of water, you live near microplastics. This is a serious and increasing ecological disaster. There are roughly 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic debris in the ocean. By 2050, in 30 years, plastic will outnumber fish by mass. One more time, when I'm in my 40s, there will be more plastic by weight than fish in the world's waterways. But this is a solvable issue. We can start to fix this problem through legislation like this plastic bag tax. Plastic bags are constantly entering our waterways. The fish are ingesting the broken down plastic. And if we're not already, we're going to be eating fish and drinking water contaminated with microplastics really soon. We have to do everything we can to preserve Virginia's waterways, and this legislation only serves that purpose. It's like Robert Swan said, the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your remarks.
Hi, I'm Steve Carter Lovejoy with the Virginia Sierra Club. We support these bills. I would point out this is a locality option. It gives us a chance to start approaching this problem, which we all know needs to be solved at some point. This gives us a chance to experiment across the state and make sure that this works well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Pat Calvert. I'm with Virginia Conservation Network. This is a local option, also seeking not to infringe on anyone's rights, but we believe that this is a positive bill that would also result in reductions to the needs. According to VDOT's own recommendations, they believe that they spend about $6 million a year cleaning up roadsides. Much of that is plastic trash, so hopefully we can see some positives come from this. So we support, on behalf of all the Virginia Conservation Network partners, this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm Philip Latassa. I'm here on behalf of the Friends of Accotink Creek. We're a volunteer group dedicated to preserving the well-being of Accotink Creek watershed. Over just the past 5 years, our volunteers have removed 2,600 bags of trash from Accotink Creek alone without making any visible impact in the problem. And this is just one of many streams in our Commonwealth. Nearly all this trash is plastic in its many and marvelous forms, plastic which will never biodegrade, never go away, but merely crumble into smaller and smaller pieces, which will remain with us and within us, accumulating for eternity. The world will come to regret our careless behavior with this useful but hazardous material. Other states, cities, and nations have taken such steps before us without suffering negative consequences. Virginia can join them in leading the way. Please support these bills. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's hear a little bit. I know that we're very familiar with this issue, but are those here to speak in opposition? Is that whole line in opposition? All right, we might want to get to major points and then just some quick remarks.
We will,
okay?
Mr. Chairman. We've been here before.
Right.
We'll refrain from a lot of detail. Each person on the Recycle Virginia Coalition will have a point. Let me start with this. You have two things. You have a tax in this, which is a taxation issue separate from the environmental issue. You have an environmental issue where you're asking to delegate authority to local government on environmental management. We don't do that in the Commonwealth. That's the framing of this. Here's the industry's response. You have the issue of responsible management of plastics. Our industry this year just set a goal of 100% recyclability and reuse of all plastics all plastics in the United States by 2040. We're taking major steps to improve recyclability and reuse for beneficial use. The second issue is pertaining to litter. And litter is something Virginia's not dealt with in 27 years. We would embrace the conversation about how to reduce litter, because these bags don't get into the waterways by themselves. People drop them. So the one thing that we want to leave you with is that DEQ is now in the middle of not only a regulatory review of the state's recycling goals and processes, but there's also a bill from last session that Senator Lewis carried with this coalition's support that has DEQ looking at the overall recycling rates and how to improve the collection of plastics. 100% of plastics are recyclable. And how to improve that, keep it out of the landfill, and keep it out of the waterways. We are committed to that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Mike Woods with Troutman Sanders. We represent the American Progressive Bag Alliance. And just a few points. Plastic retail bags are 100% recyclable. Did I make a joke?
That's,
Okay. They are the Progressive Bag Alliance.
all right, all right. Go ahead, Mike. That's,
All right, thank you very much.
That's a good.
I'm glad I could add a little humor to this process. But plastic retail bags are 100% recyclable and highly used. Plastic bags are recycled now more than ever. We operate a facility in Henrico County, employs over 150 employees. Over 70% of the bags that are manufactured there are from recycling. 1.2 billion pounds of plastic bags are recycled every year. That's a $34 million increase from previous years. The EPA shows that 74% increase in the rate of plastic bag, wrap, and film recycling. We are major sponsors of a grocery store and retailers across the United States that offer a take-back program. So, and to point out the other side of their argument, and that would be that banning or taxing recyclable plastic bags creates more cost for those that can ill afford those today. So, and policies that tax consumers with plastic bags have not shown where that reduces or increases recycling at all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Could I
yes.
ask a
Senator Stewart?
question of
Sure,
Mike,
sure.
who represents the American Progressive Bag Alliance?
That's correct, yes.
So, Mike, I live on the river, and I live next to a state park, and I reckon this summer we probably picked up 5 truckloads of plastic bags off the river shore and tried to take them to the recycling center, but they don't want them because I don't know, apparently they're not fit to recycle. But you have a take-back program. I would like to invite you to come down and take all those plastic bags back.
Tell you what, I will.
They are a horrible nuisance, let me tell you. And I don't support a tax, but I'm getting really close to the point where I would support a ban on the use of plastic bags because they've gotten that onerous, certainly in the part of the world that I live in.
I think as Brett Vassy pointed out, there needs to be some personal responsibility there also, Senator Stewart, on those that use the state parks. And grocery stores and retailers, we have over 30,000 of those that have a take-back program. I'd be more than happy to follow up with you.
How can I enroll in that, please?
I'll be more than happy to find out from our manufacturer if we can participate in programs like that. And I'll follow up with you.
All right.
All right?
Very good.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
Let's move the line along then.
Hi, Kate Baker on behalf of Virginia Retail Federation. We have a longstanding policy of opposing this. It's a burden on our retailers and a tax on our consumers.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Rob Bohannon representing the Virginia Retail Merchants Association. Would just like to add to another concern from our aspect is the disparate treatment around the Commonwealth, different localities, different tax structures. We then have to manage all of that too if this were to move forward.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. Katie Hellebush representing the Virginia Forestry Association. You've heard a lot about the use of plastic bags today, and I just want to weigh in on the impact to paper bags. And speaking only to Senator Evans' bill, since the other bill does not impact paper. So I just want to clarify my comments. But wanted to let you know that Virginia obviously has a healthy forest industry and produces a lot of timber. Paper bags are renewable and recyclable, reusable, and compostable. We certainly harvest, and it's a sustainable resource, and so we would encourage y'all to vote against this measure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair,
Morning.
members of the committee. Susan Seward with the Virginia Forest Products Association. We also reserve our opposition simply to Senator Evans' bill. And just as a reminder, we are now approaching a 70% recycling rate on paper and paperboard, 65.8% in 2017. So we're hitting the recycling mark with the paper products. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we got one more.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Kyle Shreve with the Virginia Agribusiness Council. I'd like to associate my remarks with those of Ms. Hellebush from the Forestry Association. We also stand in opposition to Senator Evans' Bill 1070. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, with issues that we're very familiar with, you all, I guess the bill, you wanted them presented together, but there's kind of standalone. Y'all weren't thinking
Just
of rolling
briefly,
them.
I'm happy to roll it into Senator Peterson's, and I'm surprised the Agribusiness Council is supporting it. I had some stats here about the cost that cotton goes, for cotton manufacturers, they get less money when they are in the bales, but they're often swept up in the baling machinery. We've had in past years, had the Farm Bureau, I believe it was, testify for it. I don't want to represent what their position is now, though. So that's all I've got to say. And also, in reference to picking up all the bags, as we heard from David Melman, the student, they're not going to pick up all the microplastics that you're eating with your fish tonight,
Okay.
if you have fish.
All right, so you're asking us to roll your bill into?
Please.
So mine would be plastic only.
Plastic only, just put your name on there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that requires,
I'll move it.
is there a second? All right, clerk, open the roll. This is to roll the bills together.
Don't vote no yet. Don't get too excited.
Okay, clerk, close the roll. Ayes 15, no 0. The bills are rolled together with the substance of Senator Peterson's bill, which was viewed. Okay, there is a motion properly supported that the bills be reported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, open the roll. Okay, clerk, close the roll.
So that's still going to get Stewart.
Ayes 5, noes 11. The bill are defeated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, it was good testimony. Really appreciate the yes. Progressive Ag Alliance, right. And thank you. It's good to have young people from Richmond here presenting on the bill.
Somebody explain the progressive ag.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right, we apologize. We've got, staff thought it would be good to put some of these tough bills up front so we could just work on them. So that's what we're doing. All right, Senator Chafin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say this is a different kind of tax bill than what you just heard. And it is simply to extend the gas severance tax, local tax that is collected in Southwest Virginia from the production of gas and exploration of gas. This bill has been, the sunset has been extended every 2 years for, I've been doing it since I've been here. Senator Puckett did it since the time he was here. Jack Reeser did it during the time he was here. It's had a long history with this committee, and we would ask the committee to consider it.
Well, let me try this. I'm going to presume this is routine. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this? Anyone here to speak in support of it? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Howe.
I just wanted to point out that a few years ago, JLARC did a study and found this to be a totally ineffective way to impact policy. And furthermore, it assists the employers in the coal industry, does nothing for the coal mine.
Okay, I think that point has been raised. The further discussion? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? Is there a second? Motion properly supported to report the bill. Hearing no further discussion, clerk open the roll. Record your votes. Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 13, noes 2.
Ayes 13, noes 2. The bill, that is Senate Bill 1165, is reported.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Chafin. Senator Peake.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon. Is it afternoon already?
Oh,
my
I think
goodness.
it's evening.
Okay, Senator Peake.
Yes, yes.
You help us out here. Do something. Do it quickly, whatever.
I want to take you back to that spirit that y'all had when Senator Deeds was here early and y'all had been
We voted for something we
rejected
had never
his
voted
bill
for before.
and they finally passed it. I think this
Oh.
is one of those
Oh.
bills. This is a bill on compensation of local jails for cost of incarceration. I was here last year on this bill. Senator McDougal was very mean in his questioning of me. I have not forgotten that. The main issue.
Mr. Chairman, I want to add that was deserved. Just
And to get to it, there are 3,500 people, prisoners who are eligible for state prison are being held in local jails. The Central Virginia Regional Jail has an average daily cost of $79, which is lower than the statewide average of $85. But the state's only paying approximately $43 of that cost. And that's, brought it for the Central Virginia Regional Jail. I think it's similar to a lot of other regional jails. They're getting, the cost is $79 to $85. They're getting reimbursed around $40 to $43. The daily provision is around $4. And at one time, it had been approved at $12. I have, VACO folks are here. They support the bill again. We're happy to answer any questions, but I understand we're long in the hour at this point.
But did you want to say anything on behalf of FACO? We understand that y'all would like this.
Briefly.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Katie Boyle with the Virginia Association of Counties, and just want to register our support. Thank the senator for bringing this up. I will say we understand there's a lot of interest in enhancing the level of care that is provided to inmates in local and regional jails, particularly with behavioral health. And so we're really interested in working with the state on some additional support to provide that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David?
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, David Blunt, Thomas Jefferson Planning District, which includes Louisa County, represented by the good senator, and we've had a long-standing position in support of trying to close that gap between what the actual costs are and what the funding is, and we support the bill.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone here to speak in opposition? All right, Senator Peake, I think you understand, you mentioned Senator Deeds. He's been here like 10 years in a row. This is just your second year?
I just don't know if I can make it 10 straight years, Senator Hanger.
Okay.
Go back to that prior good feeling y'all had.
All right, what's the pleasure of the committee?
So quiet up
All right, we
there
need a motion.
sometimes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Donovan.
I do think this is something we need to look at. We do have to address standards of care in our jails, and I understand that we don't know how it will work out. I wonder if maybe the clause would be appropriate here and consider it.
That's one of the possibilities. Are you making?
That's an excellent possibility.
Okay, I'm not hearing a motion. So, motion, is there a second to that? Second, okay. For discussion, hearing none, all those in favor of the financial contingency clause signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, what's the pleasure? The bill is amended. Motion properly supported to report the bill. as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk open the roll. Cast your votes.
Oh, that semi-loving feeling. How wonderful. Thank you.
All right. All right. I 16 no zeros. Thank you, Senator Peake. We'll see how that works out. Senator McPike.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
All right. Senate Bill 1632 is looking to provide a tool at the request of the City of Manassas Park. This committee and many of you have participated and done some fantastic work in terms of setting up a framework for the Auditor of Public Accounts and doing the early warning system. Manassas Park happens to be one of those ones. Several years ago, they actually had a lot of their financial information lost, and they've been doing and working to rebuild that information. So what this does is allows both treasurers, commissioners, revenue, it's permissive. It allows them to share and help to coordinate information with the chief financial officer or the local administrator. They've been working through a number of issues, and they've asked for this tool to assist in their process in addressing some of the issues as outlined in the report from the Auditor of Public Accounts. So that is the bill and the origins. I know you may have had some folks express some concern around that, but I'll note two things. It's still permissive for both commissioner as well as treasurer, and it still requires the same non-disclosure agreements. So it is fairly narrowly defined in order to assist with the locality in responding to the fiscal distress issues they've been facing. So be happy to answer any questions, and I believe Ms. Madeline's also here to voice some level of opposition, and we can address some of that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, let's, since you all haven't worked anything out with the commissioners, or maybe you have in part, does someone representing the opposition for the commissioners want to come forward?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. My name is Joe Horrible. I represent the Commissioners of the Revenue. Commissioners of the Revenue are committed to protecting the private financial information of our citizens. We do oppose this bill. There is no adequate articulation as to why a locality's administration needs detailed taxpayer information. There are no realistic circumstances where detailed tax information can assist a local government administration. Localities are already entitled to and provided tax information in the aggregate for use in revenue projections and budgeting. I have a list of over a dozen tax types, excuse me, where the local administration is entitled to the aggregate data. What information could be released if this bill passes? Detailed personal property information for individuals and businesses, such as year, make, and model of your cars, how many computers your business owns, and specific machines used in your manufacturing business. Also, the gross receipts of your small business, a large box retailer, or a new car dealership. In the extreme, income and assets for your mom, who is in a real estate tax relief program, could be released. Every time Title 58.1-3 is amended, with exceptions, it dilutes the expectations of confidentiality that our citizens and businesses count on from our state and local governments, and expands the opportunity for intentional, illegal, or accidental release of protected financial information. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Were there other spokespersons? Madeline, you going to speak to it?
Mr. Chairman, Madeline Abbott, representing the Commissioners of the Revenue. Excuse me. We have worked with Senator McPike and really appreciate his willingness to get together and work on this bill. It still doesn't explain why we need this in the aggregate, other than the aggregate. Why do we need your personal information or your company's information? It is permissive, but when you go that route, there is a chance for mistakes and lawsuits. Like I said, we're not quite sure why Manassas Park versus the other towns and counties and cities need this information. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think, anybody else? All right. Mr. Chairman, to follow up on a couple of those things, I've heard a lot of it. In fact, the first call I got on this bill that I was trying to abolish commissioners of revenue, which is just not the case. This bill is very narrowly defined. And a couple things about it. This is still required the same non-disclosure agreement that each one of their that's covered under the chapter and code. And so what I would offer this committee is to further narrowly define it, is to add on line 93, and we can work with staff at the end of the sentence or included in the sentence for the sole purpose of addressing the locality's fiscal issues. And it's really not about the individual records, it's about making sure that the alignment of the revenues coming in are matching up. I mean, Manassas Park lost literally all of its financial data 2 years ago, and they've been working to repair it. Furthermore, Mr. Chairman, we can add a sunset clause to this, allow them 2 years to get the books in order, and then do away with this provision in the clause. That way it's narrowly defined and we're giving the locality a tool that they're asking for. And to counter a couple of other points, there are towns are allowed to have the same information. There are localities and counties and cities that allow this information. So it's only in the different form and context of the government type that this applies. And so we have a couple different sets of rules that apply based on the locality. And so they're asking, just like a town, to be able to consolidate some of the information so they can get their fiscal house in order. And I think that's a reasonable request. And I do appreciate their work as well, because they were very concerned, and I think rightly so, on protecting of data. But this covers through lines 96 through 98, the same provisions of non-disclosure agreement. I think if we add that amendment, this further narrows it, so it's solely for the purpose of addressing the fiscal distress. And then, Mr. Chairman, if we can add the sunset clause, I'm fine with that. We give them the time
Right.
to get their house in
Mr.
order.
Chairman,
Yeah,
I'll move those two amendments.
Okay, is there a second to that? Motion properly supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, Sir McPike, if I'm reading this right, I think because of the little bit of confusion that's still going on, that the committee might be predisposed not to support your bill in the majority. I was wondering if you'd be interested in at least communicating with the commissioners over the next week, few days, and coming back rather than, if it's important to you, rather than jeopardizing it right now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right, if you would
Pass it
work
back.
on that. I can't assure you that we'll support it then, but I think you're trying to make some movements to make it better. And if you could just float that out with the commissioners and see where we go.
Appreciate it.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No objection, then we'll pass that by as amended at this moment. Senator Chase?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill, Senate Bill 1227, this is to help our teachers. You know, as many of you know, we have a shortage of teachers throughout the Commonwealth. And the hope was that we could do something to take some of our teachers who are on retirement and incorporate them back in the classroom without losing their retirement. And it just so happens that apparently there was a sunset. This is already actually current, the way it is, and it's getting ready to sunset, so we want to renew that. It extends from July 1, 2020 to July 1 of 2025, which is the sunset date for the provisions requiring the school boards, the division superintendents, and if so requested, and the superintendent of public instruction. And what it would do is this: it would annually identify and report critical shortages of teachers and administrative personnel, and permit any person receiving a service retirement allowance. It's also requested who is hired as a local school board, instructional, or administrative employee required to be licensed by the Board of Education, and then finally to elect to continue to receive the retirement allowance during such employment under certain conditions. And that's the gist of the request.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone here to speak in support of this bill? Anyone here in opposition to this bill? Okay. What's the pleasure of the committee? Any discussion? Move to report. Is there a second? I think we had three other bills that we rolled together, not similar to this, but other than that they impacted VRS, and that we rolled together and supported. I don't see VRS jumping up in opposition to this. So, okay, motion properly supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk open the roll. Record your votes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you, Senator Chase. The clerk, the bill is reported 16-0. Thank you, Senator Chase. All right, our last non-member, Senator Stanley.
You want to kill these in a block, or do you want me to go over them?
And Senator Dance, do you also have a bill in this area? With they're the identical or companion, whatever?
Mr. Chairman, if I can start with a little housekeeping.
Okay.
Senate Bill 1001, which was a tax exemption for farmers to try to grow hops and malt barley in Virginia and sell to local breweries. I'd ask that that be carried by, stricken, taken off.
Stricken?
I like carried by for the year. How about that?
Carried by for the year?
Yeah. I know it's not coming to.
So, all right. Well, it's effectively.
It's a PBI, basically, I know. But if you call it
Carried by
like,
for the
bring
year.
it back next year, that would be
Okay.
better. Yeah.
Okay, so the proper motion has been made. Is there a second? Okay, all those in, clerk open a roll.
Oh, no, yeah. That's
Sorry,
fine.
John, the motion was actually the PBI. Uh-huh. Okay. But we're carrying it with you, all right? All right, record your votes. All righty.
Thank you, Tommy.
15-1, the bill is carried by for the year. All right.
All right.
And now y'all have bills that you're working on
Yes.
together.
Yes.
Which we saw last year, so we kind of know where you're going with this. Must have had a clause on it last year that it had to be
did.
funded.
It did.
Okay.
It did. And there's budget amendment for $5 million. You know, Senator Dance has the identical bill, and I think we're going to roll ours together, and we'd ask to be chief co-patrons on Senate Bill 1001.
Okay. Is this concept still
I mean, on
being
99.
supported significantly, that you want to try to do this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anything I put forward is supported in that manner.
All right. Well, give a brief description, and then we'll.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is again the Virginia Grocery Investment Fund. Right now, think of it this way, we have 1.7 million Virginians. That's almost 500,000 of those are children who live in what we call food deserts, that they have limited access to nutritious and healthy foods. The reason is because those large grocery stores are not parking and putting their establishments in these areas. So therefore, with less opportunity for healthy meats, fish, vegetables, and fruits, they're left with our minute markets, our quickie marts to go get those foods, and those are high in sugar, those are high in fats, those are not as healthy as what the opportunities are in regular grocery stores that we in other areas take for granted. And what happens is that results in unhealthy outcomes. We have higher rates of COPD, we have higher rates of diabetes, we have higher rates of those kind of chronic illnesses, which then put pressures on our healthcare system, which is already under enough pressure in our rural areas and in our urban areas. And so what we're trying to do is to leverage a $5 million investment from this Commonwealth which would be $3 to $1 with private investment, a private-public partnership, which would in turn result in a $20 million opportunity to have these grocery stores be put in these food desert areas, which will also raise the opportunities of people to make healthy choices in their lives with regard to the food decisions that they make. Ultimately, as you know, and you probably take for granted when you go home and you go to the grocery store, you go to Giant or Safeway or Kroger, is that what you see is in what will become in these areas, and as a grocery store becomes the center hub, an anchor chain, to say, where other small businesses can grow, where people are employed, where people can become together as a community. These are the opportunities that we should have in all of the Commonwealth of Virginia, not just
because of your affluency or your zip code. So what Senator Dance and I are trying to do, and we're fully committed to this, is to create those opportunities in the underprivileged, underserved areas, the rural areas, and the urban inner cities, so that we can make a better Virginia across the state. And Senator Dance.
Okay, Senator Dance?
I will be brief and say that this is, I see it as a very important tool that the Virginia Grocery Investment Fund will help to eliminate food deserts and improve access to healthy and fresh foods, which will help all Virginians, and most importantly, concerned about children. What we found that is when children are given choices, when healthy foods are available, they select healthy foods. This is, I think, the cost is outweighed by the benefits that the children receive, and I would say seasoned people that are not as mobile and would have access to quickly be able to purchase vegetables and foods that they would need. And this comes from the American Heart Association is a main sponsor of this. There are people that want to speak, but in the interest of time, if you need that, we can provide that, but.
If people that want to speak or in favor would just raise their hand or something at this point in time, I think we're probably pretty close to where we were at last year. There's a lot of support for this, and it was lost last year because we couldn't find the money to pay for it. It wasn't a priority. So I would suggest it'll need the clause if we move it forward this time.
I just have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator
Is this a public-private partnership fund? Can industry can contribute to the fund as well as the state?
Mr. Chairman, this is a private-public partnership where they would get the benefit of the $1 for their $3 investment. And so what we're doing is we're encouraging those companies. There are companies that will do these kind of things. And what we're doing is we're encouraging them to go into areas where traditionally they've not gone into and put a grocery store, and encouraging them also then to sustain that grocery store, keep it going, and to make it profitable and also a community center. So yes, it's a public-private partnership where private entities would leverage public monies, but only after they invested $3 would they get $1 of state taxpayer money.
Okay. All right. It would appear that we may want to clause on this if we're going to advance it. Does anyone want to? Okay. Let me actually first step. Did y'all want to roll these bills together?
Yes. Yes.
Into which bill?
You can have. You want it?
Yeah, sure.
Both chief co-patrons.
But I'd like her to be my chief
$9.99.
co-patron.
I'm chief co-patron.
Okay, so this will be a recorded vote then to roll those together. When you're ready, clerk, you can open the roll on that. Record your votes to roll the bills together.
Did you vote for me?
You better vote for your own
Okay.
bill.
You got to get Senator Dance vote down there.
Oh.
Add her.
He will add. Wait a minute.
He's going to add it. It doesn't matter that it's not up there. That's good. All right.
She was trying to help us.
You got it?
Run there and do it. I'll hit your button.
Okay. It will show up on the calendar, right? Yes. Okay, good. Well, actually, that vote won't show up on the calendar, but that it will. Okay, the bills have been combined. Was there a motion to put the financial contingency clause? Yes, sir. Okay, motion properly supported. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, the bill as amended is in front of us. The bill is as amended. Is there a second? Motion properly supported. Clerk, open the roll. Senate Bill 999. Okay. I-16, no zero. Senator Stanley, Senator Dance, the bills are reported.
That never happens to any of my bills in this committee unless they're
You just had to pair up with Senator
16-0,
Dance, that's
so-
all.
Yeah, you and I are partners forever. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you, thank you. All right, we've got, Senator Carrico, you've got some people here. I think if we can move some bills, we've got several other bills that we probably could move fairly quickly and maybe infringe a little bit on caucus time, but let's see what we can do here.
So real quickly, Mr. Chairman, you saw this bill last year. It was a carryover from last year. It's dealing with the cigarette tax authority for counties to hold a referendum to give them the same taxing authority as city and towns have, up to 5 cents on cigarettes.
Okay.
This is, as you're all aware
You okay
of
with,
the situation in counties, the only taxing that they have is for property taxes, and this will give them a little more of a tool in the toolbox to use. And here today to speak to it are the president of VACO, who happens to be from Witt County, Tim Reeves, and
Oh, yeah.
and then Eric Workman from Bland County and Joe Guthrie from Pulaski County. As you'll see, we grow them pretty big here, so
Yeah, okay.
they'll just come on up. So I finally found someone bigger than I was. So.
All right, good.
Thank you, Senator.
All right. Thank y'all for being here today.
Thank you all, and thank you all for your time, and I'll be brief. I'm Eric Workman, the county administrator in Bland County. In Southwest Virginia, we're a large locality of 6,800 people. 600 of them are incarcerated, so really about 10% of our citizens are in state penitentiary. But one of the challenges that we have is that we are a beautiful county. We are small and rural, but a third of our county is national forest. And so when you look at the major tax revenue sources that we have, it's real estate or personal property. And so if we implement a 1% increase to real estate, it generates $26,000. So if you think about that, last year our health insurance costs for employees went up $58,000. So that's the equivalent of a 2% tax increase on real estate. So as we think about the challenges that we face to meet demands, whether it's mandates or just providing for schools or whatever it may be, we are very, very limited. Taxing our real estate, taxing our personal property. By the way, personal property, 1% gets us $19,000. So we have a very, very small tax base. Our support behind this, we have 60,000 vehicles a day that travel Interstate 77 through our county. They travel to West Virginia, they travel north, they travel to other states where the cigarettes are a lot more expensive. So we have a large amount of sales in our region because people as they travel through. So we're totally in support of this bill. In absence of time or in support of time, I'll reserve the rest of my comments. But thank you all for your support of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Joe Guthrie. I represent the Cloyd District on the Pulaski County Board of Supervisors. I'm speaking to you today in support of Senator Carrico's bill, both on behalf of the Pulaski County Board of Supervisors, for whom this is our top legislative priority, and as you can see, for a coalition of counties who have joined in support of this legislation. Senator Carrico's bill allows for a tobacco tax in counties, providing a funding source to help us to close the gap in shortfalls in funding to counties without legislators having to vote for a tax increase. The General Assembly is only allowing members of the boards of supervisors, folks like myself, to allow our citizens to vote on a referendum to increase a tax on themselves should they choose to do so. This is not a new tax. It's not even a tax increase. It's simply allowing localities that do not currently have the right to implement this tax the same rights that cities, towns, and 2 counties, Fairfax and Arlington, already have. The current law currently creates inequity between cities and towns on one side and counties on the other. Currently, cigarette consumers, we're finding, are traveling from outside of cities and towns to purchase cigarettes in unincorporated areas of counties. And this hurts not only the municipalities, but it also hurts retail merchants in cities and towns. This lost revenue can be very substantial. As an example, in Pulaski County, all of our largest cigarette retailers are in unincorporated areas of the counties, with Walmarts outside of the towns of Dublin and the city of Radford, and our service stations near Interstate 81. We estimate that a tax equal to that already allowed in cities and towns could generate revenues of $500,000 to $1 million per year for Pulaski County. That's a substantial increase for our county treasury. We would plan to use the revenues for this to help to pay for school construction projects and school improvement, and that would help us to have other debt capacity for economic development projects. The current law also creates law enforcement problems as travelers along Interstate 81 are stopping and buying large quantities of cigarettes in our county and others along our interstates. Many of those cigarettes we find are later showing up on the black market in the Northeast, so we'd like to help to prevent that as a law enforcement problem. And we also like to provide a revenue stream from outside of our county
from the travelers that we're seeing along our interstate. So for these reasons, we ask for your support of this bill, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tim Reeves, Chairman of the Wythe County Board of Supervisors and President of the Virginia Association of Counties. Mr. Chairman, you heard firsthand in November, you and Delegate Wire, the overwhelming support of counties for this legislation. And I could go through a whole long list, but I'll keep it short. But the counties need this extra revenue. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think y'all have made your case. Is anyone here to speak in opposition? When we're at VACO, I think the point that I made then was the timing probably wasn't right this year. Senator Carrico, I support what you're doing, and I actually would remove the referendum. I think we need to move on this, but I seriously, I mean, from my perspective, don't think the timing is right this year in terms of the politics of it and the timing of it as far as how we would do that. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Next year,
Is that what you said last year, though?
Well, did I say that last year?
I thought you were referring back to last year's notes. I didn't.
No. This is, what I will say to you is, you want to do it next year, I will be a chief co-patron with you. We'll do it statewide.
I always say neither you nor I.
If we're here, if we're going to be here. Right. Well, anyway, those are just my editorial comments. What's the pleasure of the committee? Okay, we've got a motion properly supported to report. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk open the roll.
Yeah, vote me aye. Aye. Good.
Okay, clerk close the roll.
Ayes 6, noes 10.
Ayes 6, noes 10. The bill fails to report.
Thank you.
But I'm serious about that commitment for next year, if I'm back. Okay, Senator Donovan, you have someone here. We are out of time, but I want to try to clear a couple bills if we can. You still okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Senate Bill 1425, and it's regarding our food truck industry. And just a brief review of that. The food truck industry nationwide has gone from $615 million a year in 2015 to $2.7 billion now. I'm sorry, that's in the last 5 years. That was 14. It is one of our best performing segments in the broader food service sector, and it's a great small business. Families can work full-time jobs and open these businesses because they require minimal capital and a lot of flexibility in the work. What the proposal I have before you now is that when a food truck registers in its locality and pays its locality taxes for where the kitchen is located, that they do not have to get additional permits as they go into other localities and again pay taxes in those localities. A brick and mortar only has to pay in the locality that they're in. And this is a way for us to really support this burgeoning small business industry that we have. It's a small amount of money for the localities. I've talked to my locality. It's a lot of money for these small businesses. This is particularly important right now because in Richmond, we have a new food truck incubator that is starting up. It's called Hatch, and it'll be where the food trucks can locate their commercial kitchens, which is an important part of getting a license with the health department. So they'll have an appropriate commercial kitchen and we'll be able to work out of that. So we're incubating this small business industry here in the Central Virginia area, and I'd like to support them by removing some of their obstacles to success. I do have somebody to speak here today.
Okay, we can hear from someone briefly.
Introduce yourself and talk about it. Sorry. Introduce yourself and talk about
Sure. Hi, Mr. Chairman. My name is Austin Green. I'm a co-founder of Hatch Kitchen here in Richmond. I'm also the executive director. We work with all kinds of different food and beverage companies, incubating those businesses. We also definitely work with mobile food units or food trucks. I've spoken to lots and lots of food truck operators over the past few weeks, including the Richmond Food Truck Association. They have about 30 to 36 different food trucks under their helm, and they support this legislation. The biggest thing that I keep hearing from them is that it's hard for them to actually go in and find time to register in all these different localities. It's also prohibitively expensive. We estimated that if a food truck were to be able to go to every locality in Virginia, it would cost them well over $5,000 a year. And again, as the senator said, it's a very small amount of money for the localities, but that's a fair amount of money for these food trucks. It's a gritty business, and the margins are very thin, and time is very thin for these folks. Also, I actually couldn't get any of them to come here today because they're all working on their trucks, prepping, or at lunch right now.
Okay.
So
Thank you for taking time to present. Is there opposition to this?
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and members. Katie Boyle again with the Virginia Association of Counties, and we appreciated having some conversation with the senator last night. Unfortunately, I don't think we were able to get to a place where we're comfortable with this bill. We certainly appreciate what the senator's trying to address, which sounds to be truly very small mom and pop sort of businesses, but I think this is drafted so that it would allow much larger businesses to qualify. I think the concern is that if there's no registration in the non-home localities, I think that locality has no way of knowing that this truck is operating there. There would be no way to sort of audit the meals tax collections. And we sort of think this would put the restaurants in the non-home jurisdictions of the food truck sort of at a competitive disadvantage. So respectfully, we just have to oppose this at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others speak in opposition. Senator, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Donovan, I hope you can work on some of those. She brings up a couple of pretty good points. Maybe you can continue to work on it, but I would move that we report the bill, and maybe we can continue to work on it.
I'll be happy to work with them on
Is
it.
there a
We've
second?
had some ideas.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. Okay, the second, further discussion? I agree with Senator Newman that I think there's some potential for mischief if, in terms of, like you could run a truck up to Augusta County and park it up there all year maybe. That might be an issue.
I think they'd probably rather register in Augusta County, Mr. Chairman.
But I think if you could work on it, make sure that some of the concerns are addressed, that would be good.
Absolutely.
All right, what's the pleasure of the committee? They were motion to report. Okay, further discussion. Hearing none, clerk open the roll. Cast your votes.
He got me.
Got it.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
All right, clerk close the roll.
Thank you, Mr.
Ayes
Chairman.
15, no zero. The bill's report. Senator Obenchain, you had a pretty simple bill, I think, if you want to go ahead and get that. Does anyone, member, have someone here to present that you want to go ahead and clear your bill? You want to try to do that? Okay, okay. All right, Senator Obenchain?
Just real quickly, I'm not sure about that. Mr. Chairman, this is Senate Bill 1428. As you remember, last year, Senator Stanley brought Senate Bill 883, which established the income tax modification for companies that invested in certain qualifying localities around the Commonwealth. And this bill is simply to add Page County to that. It's a county with no four-lane highways into or out of the county. It had an industrial manufacturing base that has evaporated over the course of the past 25 years. Its population largely spends time traveling up Route 340 to Northern Virginia to handle construction jobs and is dying for lack of investment in jobs in Page County. So, Mr. Chairman, this bill is simple. It simply would add Page County to that list.
Okay. Anyone here to speak in for or opposed to this bill? All right, there's a motion, there's a second to go ahead and report Senate Bill 1428, which adds Page County to this incentive for economic development initiative. All right, hearing no further discussion, the clerk open the roll, please. Cast your votes. Okay. Ayes 14, no zero. The bill is reported.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Senator Stewart, I see DCR here. Senator Obenchain, you indicated, were you serious about, you want to talk about that one a while, or We do? Okay. Sure, go ahead, go ahead. We'll,
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I've got Senate Bill 1340. It lowers the threshold for DCR review on the conservation value on these easements from $1 million to $500,000. I've heard that there's a little bit of concern. I think we're working with folks, and I don't want to keep them from coming up, but I think this is a bill that's worth going forward, and we just keep working with them to allay any concerns that they may have. I know specifically the chairman and I have talked with some folks about it and maybe have a way to do that, but that's where I think we are. I don't think anybody wants to, I don't think they don't support the bill. I think they just want to make sure that their concerns are heard, considered going forward. Maybe.
okay. So do you want to hear briefly, or do you want to go ahead?
Clyde here, if you want to ask any technical questions, he's much smarter
Okay.
than I am.
But it's your intent not to act on it today?
I'd like to act on it today, and they have my word that we'll work with them on any concerns that they have, and I'm happy to do that.
Okay,
I
well,
don't know
let's
which
hear
group you're talking
briefly,
about, but
and then we'll see whether we
Mr.
can.
Chairman, just real quick, I'd like to just let you know this is this governor's office supports this bill. We've worked this as one of our several legs of efforts to strengthen our land preservation program. Senator Obenshain, I understand the question you raised in subcommittee yesterday. Have the answer to your question. First of all, based on 2018 tax year, there would be 20 projects out of 132 that would be now under review. And Senator Obenshain had concern about the workload that creates. Well, first of all, in the introduced budget, there is a non-general fund position for DCR to make sure we can keep up with that workload on our end. As far as the workload for the land trust, Senator Obenshain, I looked, and of those 20 easements, 7 of them are held by private land trusts. Each land trust has no more than 2 that would be caught up in there. So there would be, yes, sir, as we discussed yesterday, we're talking about an increase in quality, but it would be no more than 2 easements of each land trust based on tax year 2018. One state agency had 1, and then the Virginia Outdoors Foundation had 5 of those, and I have talked with the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. I believe they support the bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Obenshain?
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't feeling real well yesterday and kind of terminated my line of questions so we could have a more substantive discussion of this bill. And my concerns go much deeper, more focused on those landowners who have property that they want to preserve. And I'm very worried about just undermining the incentive that we have for landowners who may have a $700,000 or $800,000 piece of property. It's getting more expensive and more burdensome for those landowners to go through this process. And it's already, their properties are already subject to review and evaluation by the entity that is receiving the easement, and for us to layer on an additional governmental process on top of it is going to diminish the incentive for these smaller property owners to place their land in conservation. Now, in some areas, a $500,000 piece of property may be very small, maybe in Senator Stewart's area or Northern Virginia or some places like that. But there are other places in Virginia where that's a pretty substantial piece of property, and it's a pretty big commitment for a family farmer to put that property in an easement. So that's a long-winded way of saying there are more things that I think we need to consider here.
Mr. Chairman.
I had an opportunity to talk with Farm Bureau yesterday a little bit, but probably we should, due to the late hour, we should probably just pass it by then for the day. We had a couple members that would like to look at it more closely to see if we can get to a comfort level.
Mr. Chairman, I agree, and I've spoke with some of the folks in agriculture. There's no intent here to injure agriculture. We're not trying to put any crazy restrictions on farmland. We want farmland preserved. I just want the committee members to keep in mind that folks are receiving significant tax benefits as a result of these, and they can be very profitable. The idea is you just want to make sure that you're actually getting a conservation value for the tax money that these folks are getting.
Okay. All right, thank you. So without objection, we will pass that bill by for the day. The only two remaining bills in the docket deal with the 529 program. Senator Norment has one, and he had to leave. Mary, you still here? Okay. Can you come back next week? I'm sorry, but I would work on mine, but I think we're out of time. And Senator Norment has one of the bills, which you all will be discussing. Okay, and with that, the committee will rise.